I didn't expect my regular walk home to change my entire life. One minute, I was minding my business, and the next, I was pulling a stranger out of a burning car. I didn't know he was a billionaire, and I definitely didn't know I'd end up falling in love with him. Before I dive into this crazy, beautiful story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss more powerful, real life love stories like this one. Trust me, you'll want to stick around till the end of this one. I was just trying to get home. It had been one of those long, dragging days at work. Nothing special, nothing awful, just tiring in that way where your body aches a little, and all you want is a hot shower and maybe 10 minutes of peace. I had my headphones in, my tote bag slung over my shoulder, and I was walking the same path I always did, past the corner store, across that uneven stretch of sidewalk, and then through the narrow lane that cut between two apartment buildings. Same routine, same silence. The world felt still. But then I heard it. It wasn't a normal city sound, not like traffic or someone shouting. It was loud, sharp, and terrifying. A crash, metal hitting metal, followed by something that sounded like glass exploding into dust. I yanked my headphones out, heart instantly racing, and turned toward the sound. Just ahead, around the bend where the road curved past a tall line of trees, I saw the smoke rising. My body moved before my brain caught up. I dropped my bag, sprinted down the sidewalk, and when I turned the corner, my heart nearly stopped. A car, black, sleek, expensive looking, was upside down, crushed on one side, and smoke was pouring out from the hood like a storm. A few people were standing nearby, frozen. Some had their phones out, recording. No one was moving toward the wreck. I don't know what made me run straight into it. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was something bigger. All I knew was that someone could be inside, and I couldn't stand there doing nothing. As I got closer, I could see a man slumped in the driver's seat, head against the airbag, motionless. The windshield was cracked beyond recognition. My hands were shaking, but I reached for the passenger side door. It was jammed. I tried the back door. Nothing. I could feel the heat starting to rise from the engine. My heart was pounding in my throat. "Hey," I shouted, "can you hear me?" No answer. I spotted a large rock on the curb, grabbed it, and smashed it against the side window with all the strength I had. It took 2 tries before it shattered. I reached in, unlatched the seat belt, and tried pulling him out. He was heavy. My arms burned. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. The smoke was getting thicker, and I started coughing, but I kept pulling until he was free, dragging him just far enough to get clear of the car. And not even 10 seconds later, the engine made this awful noise, like a scream. Then flames, real flames. They burst from the hood, leaping into the air like they were chasing us. I stumbled back, still holding the man's arm, and we landed hard on the pavement. People finally rushed in then. Someone called 911. Someone else threw their jacket over the man's body. I could barely breathe. My knees were scraped and my palms were bleeding, but I didn't care. I looked down at his face. He was unconscious, but alive, barely. When the ambulance arrived, the EMTs took over quickly. One of them asked me for my name, and I gave it, still in shock. I watched as they lifted him onto the stretcher, wrapped tubes around his arms, put an oxygen mask over his face. I didn't recognize him. I didn't know anything about him. I only knew that I couldn't just walk away and pretend I hadn't seen it. But once they had him in the ambulance, and there was nothing more I could do, I quietly picked up my bag and slipped away. No fanfare, no interviews. Just me, walking home again, shaken and exhausted. My legs felt like jelly. I didn't know it then, but that moment, those 10 minutes where I trusted my gut and didn't wait for someone else to step in, that would change the entire course of my life. and his. For the next few days, I went back to my usual routine, but nothing felt the same. I kept replaying the accident over and over in my head, the sound of the crash, the smoke, the way his weight felt as I pulled him from the car. I kept wondering if he was okay, if he'd woken up, if he even remembered what happened. Part of me wanted to call the hospital just to check in, but I didn't. I didn't think I had the right. After all, I was just a stranger who happened to be there. But the world has a strange way of circling back. It started with a news clip I saw while eating dinner 3 nights later. I wasn't even paying attention to the TV until I heard the words critical condition and automobile crash. I looked up, and there he was, his face, on the screen, clean cut, confident, well dressed even in the photo they used. The caption read, Elijah R. Vaughn, tech billionaire injured in crash. I froze. A billionaire? I stared at the screen in disbelief. I'd saved $1 billion. Someone who probably had houses in every country. Someone who most people never even got to meet. The reporter said he was still recovering in a private wing of the hospital. They didn't mention me, of course not. But it hit me all at once that this man wasn't just anybody. And yet, in that moment, I didn't feel proud or lucky. I just felt small. Like maybe I'd stepped into something far bigger than I realized. I told myself not to get involved, not to expect anything. I had done what anyone with a heart would do. I didn't need a spotlight for it. But the universe didn't leave it there. A week after the crash, I was walking up to my apartment when I saw a sleek black car parked outside. I thought nothing of it until a tall woman in a gray pantsuit stepped out and called my name. I stopped cold, clutching my bag like a shield. She smiled politely. Don't worry, she said. I'm not here for anything bad. Mr. Vaughn asked me to find you. My stomach flipped. Apparently, after waking up in the hospital, he'd asked his assistant, her name was Lana, to track down the woman who saved his life. It took a few days, but she'd found me through the ambulance report. She handed me a crisp envelope with a handwritten note inside. Just one short line, I owe you my life. Please let me thank you in person. E.V. I didn't know what to say. I just nodded like a robot, my heart pounding all over again. Lana said she'd come back the next day to take me to the hospital if I was willing. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking, what would I say to him? Would he even remember my face? Was I walking into something I couldn't handle? But a small voice inside me whispered, go. So I did. The next afternoon, Lana picked me up in the same black car, quiet and professional the whole ride. I kept fidgeting with my hands, trying to ignore the nerves building in my chest. The hospital was tall and modern, and they took me through a private elevator, up to a floor that looked more like a luxury suite than a medical center. And then the door opened. He was sitting upright in bed, dressed in a soft gray hoodie, his leg wrapped in a cast. But his eyes were alert, and the moment he saw me, they lit up. You came, he said, his voice raspy but warm. I nodded, unsure of what to say. And then he smiled, slow and grateful, and said, I've been waiting to meet the woman who saved my life. In that moment, I knew this story wasn't over, not even close. Walking into that hospital room felt surreal. Everything was so quiet, so still, and for a second, I wondered if I was dreaming. The room smelled like disinfectant and fresh linen, but it was warm, not cold or sterile like I expected. There was a vase of lilies by the window, and soft music played from a speaker on the nightstand. It didn't feel like a place where someone was recovering from nearly dying. It felt peaceful. Elijah, he asked me to call him that, looked better than I thought he would. Tired, yes, and pale, but alert. His eyes followed me as I stepped in, And when he smiled, something in me softened, not because he was handsome, which he definitely was, but because there was something vulnerable in the way he looked at me, like he wasn't sure I'd stay. "I'm glad you came," he said again. I sat down slowly in the chair beside his bed, tucking my hands into my lap to hide how much they were trembling. "You didn't have to send anyone," I said quietly. "I wasn't expecting this." He shook his head. "You saved my life. I couldn't let that go without saying thank you, face to face." There was a moment of silence between us. Not awkward, just full. Like there were too many things we both wanted to say, but didn't know how to start. Finally, he broke it. "I don't remember the crash," he admitted. "I remember leaving the office late and then nothing. The next thing I remember is waking up here. Lana told me someone pulled me from the car before it exploded." I nodded. "That was me. I just happened to be nearby." He looked at me then, really looked, and I felt something shift. "No," he said slowly. "You didn't just happen to be there. You chose to help. You risked your life." I didn't know how to respond to that. I'm not used to people calling me brave. I'm just used to doing what feels right in the moment. But he kept talking, and I let him. He told me he'd been moving too fast in life, always on the go, buried in meetings, barely sleeping. He said he couldn't remember the last time he'd slowed down before the accident forced him to. And in that strange way life sometimes works, he said. Maybe the crash was the thing he needed to wake him up. "I thought I had everything," he said. "Money, power, freedom. But lying here made me realize I didn't have anything real. Nothing that would have mattered if I hadn't made it." That hit me harder than I expected. I found myself opening up too, telling him a little about my life, how I worked in admin at a local community center, how I was just trying to get by, and how that day had changed me too. I didn't plan to talk so much, but he listened so intently. He asked questions, laughed softly at my sarcasm, even teased me when I said I hated coffee. He didn't feel like a billionaire. He felt like a man trying to find meaning again. At one point, I tried to leave, not wanting to overstay, but he gently asked, "Can I see you again when I'm out of here?" I blinked. "See me again?" "I mean it," he said. "Not because you saved me, because I want to know you, if that's okay." I nodded before my brain could catch up. My heart was already there. That first conversation, it wasn't dramatic or cinematic in the Hollywood way. It was calm, real, two people meeting in the quiet aftermath of something life-altering. And I think we both knew, in that quiet room with lilies by the window, that this wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning. After that day in the hospital, I expected things to slow down. I figured I'd go back to my life. He'd recover and return to his world of boardrooms and luxury. And that would be it. A beautiful, strange chapter I'd tuck away in my heart. But Elijah had other plans. He texted me the next morning, just a simple, "Thank you again. Hope your day is peaceful." I smiled at the message for far longer than I'd ever admit. It wasn't flirty. It wasn't romantic. But it felt genuine. And that was rare in my world. From then on, the messages didn't stop. Little check-ins, lighthearted jokes, pictures of his physical therapy sessions. I'd reply casually at first, trying not to read too much into it. But somewhere along the line, we started talking about real things, about music, childhood dreams, the books we loved, the things that scared us but also kept us going. He wasn't what I expected a billionaire to be, not even close. When he was finally discharged from the hospital, he invited me to dinner. Nothing fancy. He made it clear. No five-star restaurants, I promise. Just me, you, and some really good Thai food. I hesitated at first. I mean, who wouldn't? But curiosity, and maybe something deeper, pushed me to say yes. The place he chose was this little family owned spot tucked between a laundromat and a bookstore. No flash, no attention, just quiet and warm, like him. He was walking with a cane, still a little stiff, but he looked good, relaxed in jeans and a hoodie. Not a trace of ego. Just a man trying to connect. We sat at a corner table, and the moment felt surprisingly easy. Conversation flowed like we'd been doing this for years. He asked me about my job, and I told him how much I loved working at the community center, how the kids there gave me hope even on the hardest days. He listened, really listened. His eyes didn't wander. His phone stayed in his pocket. It was like I was the only person in the room. At one point, I laughed at something he said and caught him staring at me. Not in a creepy way, just soft, like he was memorizing my smile. "I've met so many people in my life," he said quietly, "but none who make me feel as grounded as you do." I didn't know what to say. I think I just smiled awkwardly and took another sip of my drink. But inside, my heart was fluttering. We started seeing each other more after that. Walks in the park, late night phone calls, sitting in his car for hours just talking about nothing and everything. It never felt rushed, never forced. He never tried to impress me with his money. In fact, he barely mentioned it. It was like he was trying to keep that part of his life in the background, as if he didn't want it to get in the way of whatever was forming between us. But that didn't mean the doubts didn't creep in. I remember one evening we were walking near the lake, and I asked him point blank, "Why me, Elijah? You could be with anyone, models, actresses, women who live in your world." He stopped walking and turned to face me. "Because none of them pulled me out of a burning car," he said, half smiling. "None of them saw me at my weakest and didn't flinch. You didn't care who I was. You cared that I lived." I looked away, suddenly shy, but he reached for my hand, and for the first time, I let him hold it. Still, I wrestled with my feelings. I didn't want to be some fleeting interest for a man who lived in private jets and luxury suites. I didn't want to fall into something that would leave me broken. But the thing about Elijah was, he never rushed me. He was patient. He let the connection grow, let the trust build. Slowly, day by day, he peeled back the layers of who he was, the man behind the success, the one who got anxious before public speaking, the one who still missed his mom, the one who didn't know how to cook but really, really wanted to learn. And somewhere in all of that, between shared takeout, long walks, and vulnerable confessions, I stopped seeing him as the man I saved. I just started seeing him as my person, and it scared me how real that felt. I remember the exact moment I realized I was falling for him. It wasn't during some big romantic gesture. It wasn't when he took me to a fancy art gallery or whispered sweet things into my ear. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday night. We were sitting on his couch in his surprisingly cozy living room, watching an old movie I'd forced him to try. It was some cheesy 90s rom-com, full of overused lines and dramatic music. He hated it, but he watched every minute of it because I loved it. And somewhere between the second bowl of popcorn and me laughing at a terrible joke the main character made, I looked over and caught him already watching me. That soft, calm look in his eyes, like I was the most interesting thing in the room. That was the moment, right there. No fireworks, just that look. From then on, everything started feeling a little more intense. Our conversations got deeper. We weren't just learning about each other anymore. We were slowly weaving our lives together. He shared more about his past, his father's pressure to be perfect, the loneliness of success, the fear that people only cared about what he had, not who he was. I'd listen, sometimes holding his hand, sometimes just letting the silence speak. One night, we stayed up late talking about what scared us the most. He said, "Losing someone I finally care about." I looked at him, not saying a word, but inside, my heart clenched. Because I knew he meant me, and I wasn't far behind. But still, something inside me held back. Maybe it was years of guarding my heart. Maybe it was the fear that this wasn't real, that one day I'd wake up and he'd disappear back into his world, and I'd be left wondering if it ever really happened. Elijah, though, he was patient, always calm, always steady. He never pushed, never asked for more than I could give. He was just there, every day, every text, every check-in. He made space for me in his life without ever asking me to change who I was. Then came the night he laid it all out. We were sitting on a rooftop, bundled in jackets, sipping tea under the stars. He had planned this quiet night for just the two of us. No distractions. I remember him staring up at the sky for a long while before turning to me. "That crash, it didn't just break my car," he said softly. "It broke the life I thought I wanted. And then you showed up, pulled me out of it, literally. And suddenly I didn't want to go back to how things were. I want this, whatever this is between us. I want to build something real." I sat there, stunned. No one had ever spoken to me like that, like I was the turning point in their life, like I mattered in a way that went beyond the surface. "You're not saying this just because I saved you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He shook his head. "I'm saying this because you've given me every reason to live differently, to love differently." I didn't say anything right away. I didn't have to. I leaned my head on his shoulder, closed my eyes, and just let the moment wrap around me like a blanket. That was the night things shifted. It wasn't just flirting anymore. It wasn't just emotional comfort. It was something rooted, something that scared me and thrilled me all at once. It was love, quiet, slow growing, but undeniably real. When Elijah told me he had a surprise planned, I didn't think much of it. He was always doing little thoughtful things, sending my favorite tea when I had a long week, leaving voice notes with jokes to make me laugh when I was feeling low. So when he asked me to keep one Saturday evening free, I figured it was another one of those small, sweet gestures. I didn't expect what came next. That evening, he picked me up himself. No driver, no bodyguard, just him behind the wheel, smiling like he was hiding a secret he couldn't wait to share. He didn't tell me where we were going, just drove with the windows down, music playing low, and one hand resting gently over mine the whole ride. We ended up at a quiet beach outside the city, the kind of place you'd only know about if you weren't looking for anything loud or flashy. The sand was cool under our feet, and a soft breeze danced through the air, carrying the smell of salt and something else. Jasmine, maybe. I looked around and noticed lanterns flickering in the distance. A soft glow stretched across the shore, leading to a small setup. A dinner table just for two, with candles swaying in the wind and fairy lights wrapped around driftwood poles. I laughed quietly. "Elijah, this is beautiful." He smiled but didn't say much, just led me to the table, pulled out my chair, and let the evening unfold like a slow, perfect song. The food was simple: grilled fish, roasted veggies, warm bread, nothing fancy. But the way he looked at me, the way he held every word I spoke like it mattered more than anything, that was what made it unforgettable. We talked like we always did, open, soft, real. He reached across the table at one point and gently rubbed my thumb with his, like he was grounding himself in the moment. I thought maybe he was nervous, but I didn't ask why. Then, just as the sun dipped below the ocean, turning the sky shades of peach and lavender, he stood up and walked around to me. My breath caught when he reached into his pocket and dropped to one knee. I swear everything stopped. The waves, the wind, even my heartbeat. I've thought about this moment 1,000 times, he said, and every version of it led to you. You saved my life, yes, but you also brought me back to myself. You showed me what real love looks like, what it feels like to be seen and still chosen. I couldn't breathe. My hands flew to my mouth as tears welled up. I don't want a life that doesn't include you, he continued, voice steady but soft. I don't care where we live, what we have, what we face. I just want you. Will you marry me? For a second, I was frozen, not because I didn't know my answer, but because I couldn't believe the moment was real. Me, just a regular black girl from a quiet part of town, standing barefoot on a beach, with a billionaire on one knee asking me to spend forever with him. Then I nodded. Yes, I whispered. Yes, 1,000 times. Yes. He stood up, slipped the ring onto my finger, a delicate, stunning piece with a stone that sparkled like starlight, and pulled me into the kind of hug that feels like home. I cried. He kissed my forehead, and we just stood there for a long time, wrapped in each other and in the sound of waves breaking softly on the shore. That night didn't feel like a dream. It felt like the beginning of something we had both been waiting for, something true, something earned, something beautiful. Forever had never looked so real. People think life suddenly becomes perfect once you say yes, like everything hard or uncertain just disappears because you're now engaged, especially to someone wealthy and powerful. But the truth? Life still has its messes, its late nights, its doubts and quiet worries. The difference is, you're not carrying them alone anymore. Waking up next to Elijah didn't change who I was, but it changed how I felt about the world. I still had my routines, coffee in the morning, checking in at the community center, laughing with the kids who always managed to make life feel lighter. But now, there was this steady hand beside me, a voice that reminded me I wasn't invisible. A man who loved me not in grand gestures alone, but in the little things, like making sure my car always had gas, or sneaking handwritten notes into my lunch bag when I worked late. We didn't throw ourselves into planning a lavish wedding right away. In fact, we didn't talk about wedding dates at all for a while. We just wanted to live in this new chapter we'd built together. Some days we'd go grocery shopping like a regular couple, me pushing the cart, him adding way too many snacks we didn't need. Other days, we'd sit in the back of his home office, me reading while he worked, legs stretched out across his lap. The simplicity of it all made me fall deeper in love with him, because for all the wealth and status he had, Elijah never made me feel small. He never made me feel like I had to become someone else to stand beside him. Instead, he brought me into his world, his plans, his future. He even asked me one night, completely out of the blue, if you had the resources, what would you change in your neighborhood? I laughed at first, thinking it was just a thoughtful question, but I answered honestly. I'd open a bigger center with more programs, more counselors, more jobs, somewhere kids could feel seen. 2 weeks later, he handed me a folder. Inside was the full plan, architect designs, cost breakdowns, grant proposals, my dream, already in motion, funded, backed, and named after my grandmother. I cried, not because of the money, but because of what it meant. He didn't just listen, he heard me. He believed in what mattered to me. And that's when I realized love isn't just about passion and chemistry. It's about partnership. It's about building something together, brick by brick, dream by dream. Of course, not every day is perfect. We've had arguments about work, about time, about silly misunderstandings that felt big in the moment. But even in conflict, Elijah never walked away. He never shut down or made me feel like I was too emotional or too complicated. He'd sit with me, hold my hand, and say, "Let's figure it out." That's the kind of love I didn't know I could have, the kind that stays, the kind that chooses you over and over again, even when it's not easy. Now, when I look down at the ring on my finger, I don't see wealth. I don't see status. I see the fire I pulled him from. I see the slow conversations, the rooftop talks, the first awkward laugh over dinner. I see the girl who acted on instinct and the man who saw something in her worth loving for a lifetime. And most of all, I see a love that feels real. Not perfect, but real. A love I get to live in every single day. Thanks for listening to my story. If it touched your heart even just a little, go ahead and like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who still believes in love. And remember, sometimes one moment of courage can lead to a lifetime of happiness.